Good afternoon and thank you for joining me in our first series of webinars. Today we're going to be looking at Look to Learn and Look to Learn scenes and sounds, and particularly focusing on those early eye gaze skills. My name is Kerry Vacara. I'm the Training and Resource Manager for Smartbox, and I've been with the company for about 6 months now. And one of our goals is to obviously develop the training and develop a series of webinars. So thank you for joining the first of these sessions. If you have any ideas for future webinars, please let me know after this session, because I'd be really interested to hear sort of what webinars you'd be interested in. So for today's session then, as I said, we're looking at early eye gaze skills, and we're going to do that by focusing on Look to Learn. Now, for those of you who don't know what Look to Learn is, I thought I'd start with a very brief overview. Look to Learn is a collection of eye gaze games. There's 48 eye gaze games divided over 5 different categories. And the categories range from the sensory level, which is sort of looking at cause and effect, right through to control, which is sort of specific targeting of different items on the screen. Scenes and Sounds, which was released in the summer, is basically an expansion pack for this. It has an additional 26 activities and looks at further skill development with early eye gaze. The idea behind Look to Learn then, as you can see from the Wordle on the right hand side, is it's designed to be fun, engaging and motivating. It's got lots of obviously visual feedback and audio feedback. It's bright and colourful to engage the user so that they find eye gaze something fun and exciting to do. And hopefully then obviously progress through and build up a range of eye gaze skills which will allow them to be successful using it for communication or computer control or however they're going to be using it. What I'm going to do for this session then is take you through and look at the different skills that can be developed using Look to Learn and Scenes and Sounds, and then we're going to go on to talk about how that can be assessed. The first skill that I really want to talk about is cause and effect. And this is obviously a really important skill to enable users to make the link between what the eyes are doing and the impact it's having on whatever's on the screen. And I think for some users, this is a very simple link. For other users, it can be quite a difficult concept to comprehend. So the cause and effect is a really important place to start. There were a number of cause and effect activities in the original Look to Learn, many of them in the sensory category. And so the activities that we're going to look at today in Scenes and Sounds will build on that. The two I've picked are the guitar activity and the xylophone activity. And these are both really nice ways to allow somebody who might not usually be able to access a musical instrument to be able to play an instrument. So I'm going to flick over into Scenes and Sounds. And I'll go into the sound section. And the first one we'll look at is the guitar. Now the nice thing about this for me is that the guitar fills the whole screen. So at this point, obviously with cause and effect, we're not worrying about the user having to access a specific area of the screen. We're just allowing them to track around the screen. And if I move around the screen, you'll see as I hit the guitar chords, I'll obviously hear the audio feedback. And obviously the nice thing about this as well is we've got the visual feedback with the musical notes as we're tracking across the screen. Okay, so if I come out of that and we'll have a look at the xylophone activity. Again, the xylophone's similar. The xylophone fills most of the page. You'll notice from this that I am not a guitar or a xylophone player. But again, as we track across, it plays various notes for us, and we obviously get the visual of the note and the visual that the key we're playing is bigger. So cause and effect, as I've mentioned, is really important, and those are two nice games which I think allow the user to be quite easily engaged in that sort of cause and effect level. Building on that though, we need to look at something like exploration. And I think exploration opens up the opportunity for a user to be able to explore the whole screen and look at specific things on the screen. So now rather than having to be, or rather than being a bit more random, we're starting to get into being a bit more definite. The two activities that I've picked for this are the scenes, because I think the visual scenes in Look to Learn and Scenes and Sounds are a really nice way for a user to start exploring specific designated items on a screen. There were two scenes in the original Look to Learn, and they were really popular, so there's a whole section of scenes in Scenes and Sounds. One of the things that I think is really nice is that the scenes available in Scenes and Sounds cover a wider age range. So whereas the Look to Learn ones many people felt were for sort of the lower primary end, these ones cover a much broader age range. So you can see here that we've got a selection of 8 scenes. The two that we're going to look at are Planet Pog and Rumble in the Jungle. So we'll start with Planet Pog. So the nice thing about the scenes is I can happily track my eyes around the screen, and as I select any of the objects, I'll have a visual or an auditory response from them. Now what's nice about the scenes in Scenes and Sounds is that they build on the original scenes that were in the original Look to Learn. So the original scenes, you had to basically track around the screen as we've just done here. Now what we're adding into the scenes is the ability to use the dwell click function. So we're already in our sort of exploring section, learning how to do some early dwell clicking, which we'll look at later on. So that's the Planet Pog. If I move into Rumble in the Jungle, this one we've got a bit of noise in the background to set the scene. And if I track round, you can see there's a number of objects here that I can set off. You'll notice on the left hand side there that the head keeps popping up and down. So again, a bit like the rocket in Planet Pog, I've got something which I don't just have to track round to be able to select it, I actually have to time it with when it appears. Okay, so as I've said, the scenes really, I think, are a lovely way for a user to build on what they've learnt with basic cause and effect and be able to start to explore around the screen and look at specific objects on the screen. The next kind of level moving on from that then is going to be targeting. And if we think about targeting, it's actually quite important really for a long-term Eyegaze user, so that they can go beyond using simple games into more definite selection in readiness for using it for communication in the Grid 2, for example, or computer control. So we're not just tracking around the screen now, we're targeting specific points on the screen. And the two activities that we're going to look at here are the snowball fight and the colouring activity. So we'll go into the skills section. And the first one we'll look at is the snowball fight. Now in this one, the faces will pop out from behind a tree. So I don't know which tree they're going to pop out from behind. So I have to target the face, and I've also obviously got to be able to work out where it is on the screen. See down the bottom left that I've got the number of snowballs that I need to get rid of. And if I don't do anything, eventually they'll throw a snowball at me. So that's the snowball fight. If we move them into colouring, the nice thing about this one is you can see obviously we've got the greyed out image of a parrot on the screen, and we've got a bold outline as to the area that we need to select to add colour. The sizes of the areas I have to select will vary. So whereas in the snowball fight we're targeting generally areas that are the similar size, in this one we're having to select different size areas. And we get a really nice reward video at the end as well. So again, we can see with this one, we're starting off with the really small spots. Fantastic. So again, with sort of targeting, what we can see is that we're starting to build up our level of accuracy with our eye gaze. If we're moving on from that then, where we'd obviously look at is being able to track still and moving objects. So we're starting to refine our tracking ability, and in my head I always think of, if you imagine drag and drop with eye gaze that you'd obviously need to, for computer control, this is kind of a very, very, very early version, early form of this skill. And it helps with control, and we obviously know that if we're using eye gaze for communication, we need to have that control to be able to stay focused on a target to make a selection. So the two activities that we're going to look at for this are the desert race and the forest race. Both of them, you're in charge of the car. You have to focus on the car to make it move. If you look off the car, it will stop. And there are things that might distract on the way around, so obviously which will make you look off the car. The other thing that happens is at different points in the race, as perspective changes. So sometimes it will zoom in and sometimes it will zoom out. So again, the size of the object that you've got to focus on changes as well. So we'll start with the forest race. See now the target's getting smaller, and now we'll zoom in again. And if you want to make this competitive, we've got a timer in the top left hand corner. So particularly if you're using this in a school, for example, it's quite nice. There we go. So that's the forest race. We go now and look at the desert race. This one goes in the opposite direction. So again, it's supporting the eye gaze development, moving different directions around the screen. I think in this one there's a little bit more to distract you. You'll see the change in perspective again. Okay, so two lovely activities there to enable us to start to track still and moving objects, and again start to refine those skills. Moving on then, we talked briefly about dwell clicking earlier. Dwell clicking is obviously key for use in AAC in the Grid 2, the computer control, if you're using something like Dwell Clicker or any of the softwares, integrated softwares for the various Eyegaze cameras. Dwell clicking is a really, really important skill to be able to do, and we saw it in the early Planet Pog in the scene activity. The two that we're going to look at are Happy Birds and Bunny in the Beanstalk. Happy Birds is entirely my personal favourite activity in the scenes and sounds. I'm not sure that my husband is so keen on it, given that he's heard it so many times. However, I'm sure you'll love it. So I'm going into the sound section, and I'm going to go into Happy Birds. What we have to do is dwell click on each of the birds to make them start singing. There we go. So you can see you have to dwell click on all of the birds to start them singing and on all of the birds to stop them singing. Or you can obviously escape out of the activity if it's going to be too much to have to dwell click again to turn them off. A really, really nice activity, and I promise you, you'll only have that tune in your head for a few days before it drives you mad. So the other one we're going to look at is Bunny and the Beanstalk. So here we have our beanstalk, and here we have Bunny who wants to get to the top. She will wave at me from time to time to give me an indication that she wants me to help her climb. And you can see here that not only do I have to dwell click on Bunny, I've also got two items here that I have to track to feed Bunny. Flew away. Bunny reminds me of some of the old type platform games that I used to play. So we have to get to the top of the beanstalk. And feed her as much as we can on the way up. Nearly there. So you can see those two activities are a lovely way to basically refine dwell clicking skills that we may have used previously, but now we've got activities that are specifically focusing on that skill. So there's a range of skills that can be developed across Look to Learn and Scenes and Sounds, and I'm sure I've just given you two examples for each really, but as you go through the games you'll start to recognise obviously the skills that are being developed, and you could almost, I guess, start to do almost a skills pathway through the games if you wanted to. The other thing that I wanted to look at just for this session really is how that can then be used as an assessment tool. We all know obviously how important it is to have evidence of success and be able to track progress, not only perhaps in a classroom context, but also to provide evidence for funding to be able to purchase communication devices for individual users. So the first thing we were going to look at is the heat maps. And the heat maps give us a really basic understanding of access around a screen and whether an individual is tracking the right objects in context. So if I flick on to Look to Learn again, and we'll go and have a look at one of the skills activities. So we'll go to Ghost Hunter, I think, for this one. So I'm going to play through the game and then we'll look at the analysis at the end. Okay, so we'll just wait for the analysis of that to pop up. So what we can see from the heat map here is we can see where I've been on the screen. The red areas are obviously the areas that I've been the most. There is a red area around the house because if you notice I kept hovering my mouse over the house. But I can see actually that all of the ghosts that have popped up, I've been able to access those and that I've been able to travel across from one side of the screen to the other. Obviously, depending on the activity will depend on the information that you can get off the heat maps. But as I said, for an assessment purpose, because you can save these and then you can do another heat map in 6 weeks, 8 weeks, for example, we can start to build up an idea of the access around the screen and whether a user is able to track the right objects. If I was in a scene, for example, and I could say, can we see a cat in the scene? What I'd hope to see in the heat map is that the user had tracked to the cat. We looked earlier on at the scenes, but I think the scenes are a really useful way to look at an early assessment. And there's two ways that we can be using the scenes. So I'm just going to go over and have a look at a couple of different scenes. We can obviously have the scenes so they're user-led. So if we go into something like Funhouse, for example, we can allow the user to go around the screen and we can respond to whatever it is that they find on the screen or whatever it is they make happen. Wow, look, you made the cat jump. Goodness me. Who turned out the lights? And again. Oh, there's a horse on the telly. So we can have it as a user-led environment. Or the other thing we can do, if I flick into another scene, is use it to gather a very basic cognitive analysis of what the user understands from what is in the scene. And we can do this obviously through questioning. Okay, so we can say, what can you see in the scene? Can you see a train anywhere? Wow, you found the boat. Could you find the train? So there we can sort of judge whether obviously they're understanding specific objects on the screen, and then we can look at a different sort of area of questioning. So we're not asking them to find a specific object, but we could say, is there anything red on the screen? What can you see? Can you find anything that's red? The apples are red, that's right. Anything else? The train's red. You are right. So I think we've got the option there to use them in sort of kind of a quite a traditional way, where we're saying, you know, in Planet Pog, for example, we might say, can you see the rocket? But then actually, you know, moving away from that kind of very general, sort of almost like a summative analysis, actually being able to talk more broadly about what they can see in the scene and gauge more about their understanding, as opposed to whether they can find a train, but to whether they can find any red objects or whether they can find any animals. So we're starting to broaden that out. The other activities that are a really nice addition to Scenes and Sounds are Monkey Business. And Monkey Business comes in the form of 2 cells or 4 cells, but this is all about sound recognition. And obviously, if you want to do a very early analysis of basic sound recognition, these two are really nice activities. So we'll go into Monkey Business 2. And what we're going to hear is a range of everyday sounds. And now we're going to have to use our dwell click to select the right answer. So I get a bit of feedback there to say that I've selected the wrong thing, and I get the option to correct my answer. So for early sound recognition, Monkey Business is really nice, and as I said, that comes with 2 or 4 cells. The last thing in terms of assessment that I'm going to talk about today, and particularly focus on, is choice making. And there are a number of activities within Look to Learn and Scenes and Sounds which allow a user to make a choice. And I think, again, this is a really important skill for a user to have, and for us to be able to understand whether an individual is making definite choices or whether they're accidental choices. Obviously, particularly when we go out into thinking about communication, this is really important. So we're going to go just for once into the original Look to Learn and into the Choose category, and we're just going to look at dinner time. So in this activity, the user has to choose what to feed the man for dinner, and we have to hold our gaze on the object we want to select. And I think obviously in terms of assessment, what we can be doing is saying, should we feed him the hamburger? Can you find the hamburger? Or how about we feed him the worm? Let's feed him the worm. Well done, you fed him the worm. What's going to happen? Oh, yeah. So from an assessment point of view, choice making again, it's just a nice way to give us a general overview of the user's understanding and ability to make definite choices. The other tool that I think is quite nice, which I'm just going to flick to, is the Look to Learn workbook. The Look to Learn workbook goes through each of the activities, and it has a page like this that you can see in front of you. On the top right hand side, it gives you an idea of how to use it, and it tells you sort of the overall aim of the activity. You can record what the objective was when you looked at that activity, the date, the time of day, and you can also look at evidencing whether a particular area was demonstrated, whether it's developing or whether it was achieved, and you've got the opportunity to make some observations. All of these are linked to P-scales. So again, there's an appendix at the back which goes through the P-scales, but it means that you can now evidence the work that an individual is doing on Eyegaze and Look to Learn with their P-scale targets. There is at the back of this book as well, obviously there's quite a lot of recording to be done in this sheet. There is a quick observation sheet at the back as well, and there's also within the workbook a reward that you can give to the user for achieving a good score on a target shoot or a different activity. So again, in terms of assessment, that's another really nice way of supporting, and it's a good assessment tool. So if you want to think about where you might go beyond today's webinar, the first place I was going to direct you was to the website. If you want to have a look at scenes and sounds, because you've seen some that you like today, you can download a copy of that software, and you get 4 activities free if you download it as a trial. Obviously you have to purchase it as an addition to the existing Look to Learn, but if you want to have a look and a play around with it, you get 4 free activities in the trial version. If you've got a number of users in mind that you think Eyegaze might be appropriate for, we do offer Eyegaze clinics, and you can contact us to discuss the possibility of an Eyegaze clinic coming into your school, for example, and we'll look at having a go with Eyegaze with a number of users throughout the day. So I just wanted to end really by saying thank you again very much for being part of our first series of webinars. And as I said earlier, if you have any ideas for any sessions that you'd like to see in the future, then please do let me know. If you want to go on the website, the web address is there. You can contact the office with that telephone number or the support email. If you've got anything specific that you'd like to talk to me about regarding webinars or training, then my email address is at the bottom. But thank you again for joining me, and I look forward to seeing you at the next series.